Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of E-Coffee with Experts. I'm your host, Matt Fraser. And on today's show, I have with me the pleasure of speaking with Joshua Maddux, the founder and CEO of 95 Visual, a premier web application development firm located just outside Los Angeles, California. With an in-depth background in website planning, strategy, development, and architecture, Joshua has established himself as a leader in the industry, helping his clients establish and maintain a better web presence through information architecture, project management, and web strategy. He has a proven track record of helping businesses 3x their customer interactions, their leads online. He is also an active member of the business community, serving on the Santa Clarita Valley Business Group Board and the UCSB PACEX Advisory Board. We'll find out about that. And is a member of the Santa Clarita Chamber of Commerce and Valley Industry Association. Joshua, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Awesome. Good to be on.
Fantastic. Joshua, how would your university professors describe you as a student?
It depends on which class. In school, I definitely enjoyed certain classes over others, as all of us probably have had that experience. I would say in my classes such as marketing or ethics or business law, I was getting stuff done on time and turned in and doing that. The classes such as biology that you had to take in college just because everybody had to take it. I'm not going into the medical field. I don't see any reason to be in this class, and we'll get it done. Might not be the best 150% effort.
It's kind of hard to focus on something you're not interested in, at least in my opinion.
Or that's not as applicable.
Absolutely. To your field of study or your field of interest. Have you always been entrepreneurial? Like, for instance, growing up, did you have a paper out and all those things and part-time job and hustling to do the grind to make money?
So yes and no. I've definitely been entrepreneur a lot of my life. My brother, ages ago, he started making like duct tape wallets when that was like first a trend, and it was we could sell these online. Like, how do you register a domain name? There's this website that you have to go to, and like, how do you make a website? And this is ages ago, and it was like, how do we take payments online? It was like trying to figure all that mess out. And now it's very different. You can spin up a Shopify account or just use Etsy or one of those platforms, and there's tons out there. But it's projects like that, or running my business or other concepts. And I have a handful of friends that are all business owners, and we're always talking about some idea or some concept or something that we're working on. Or so it's continuing to bounce those off other people and come up with new ideas on a weekly basis.
What inspired you to start 95 Visual?
So this is a interesting story. It's twofold. One is I was actually in college pursuing a degree in a totally different direction. And as I was in college, there was a local web company who was not completing projects on time or was not completing them, period. And I came in and had helped a few companies basically complete those projects. And what I didn't know at the time was one of those business owners was in a networking group. And that business owner, the networking group that he was in, had multiple other businesses that also had the same problem caused by the same web developer. And I'm not saying that all web developers do this. It's typically the minority that causes the bad rap for the rest of us. And so little did I know that me helping a friend solve a problem on their website would all of a sudden create a list of clients within. And at that time, it was more or less almost all like webmaster stuff. It was
Mhm.
We're talking 15, 17 years ago,
Yeah.
where sites didn't have a great front end like they do today. You couldn't
Yeah.
rearrange objects on a page easily. You basically had to FTP in and change out code.
Yeah.
And
Tables and CSS.
yeah. And so it was that type of stuff. And so it was swapping out content, images, just the basic webmaster stuff oftentimes.
Yeah.
And fast forward a few months, I was going to class during the day, and weekends and evenings, I was working on project stuff for clients, and it quickly started to grow.
Unlike Mark Zuckerberg, you completed your degree.
Yes, it did.
No, some people have done that. They just said, the hell with it. I'm just going to focus on the business. The hell with finishing the degree. But hey, good for you for finishing something you started. So what approach did you take then to solving, like, these other people were failing, businesses, entrepreneurs, whatever, failing at the web development process? What approach did you take then, and how has it evolved?
So there's definitely two aspects to that. So the first is, I saw that a lot of the companies that come into the market and end up fail for typically one of two reasons. One, they see web design or marketing as a get rich quick type element. They come in and they go, I need to make $100,000 in the next 90 days. If that's your goal, don't start a marketing company. If your goal is to build business relationships and help those businesses grow, that's a great goal. And if you help 5, 10, 50, 100 businesses grow, and they all grow exponentially, your business will grow and you'll make money. But with that, I oftentimes see a lot of companies where they come in and their goal is just to get as many clients as fast as possible, to pay as much as possible, and they don't care what casualties are left in the wake. And the problem is, oftentimes it's the clients that they have destroyed their businesses and they're not referring. And that's just a terrible way to start that. So that's one of the big issues I see. And then the other issue is, oftentimes people come into the industry and they say, I'm going to price at the lowest end of the market so I can get the most amount of clients. And the problem is, they're doing work that they should be billing $1,000 for, and they're billing $200, and it's not sustainable. And then as they scale that up, they're losing 10, 20%. And as they start to scale, they start hiring, and then they realize that they have a team of 4 people that are working for them, and they're all losing money. And if you're losing $1,000 a month having one employee, and it's not profitable, it's not going to be profitable, hiring 5 more employees doesn't fix the problem. It just makes the problem worse. And so it's the aspect of twofold. One, charging an adequate price that we know we can get the job done for, not necessarily being the cheapest in the market, but also doing what we say we're going to do and following through on it. And sadly, one of the things that I saw in the market was not necessarily half, but a good chunk of the web companies that were failing because they couldn't deliver on time and under budget. Basically, follow through on the promise you made.
So you can deliver on time and on budget. It's interesting. As web developers, and I've developed websites and designed websites, it's hard because we have to begin with the end in mind and guesstimate based on the scope of work that the client tells us of how long it's going to take. And we have to guesstimate what the cost per action is going to be, and then figure out how much it's going to cost and what kind of margin we're going to make. And we have to price that proposal competitively in order to get the job. It's almost like someone going to a car dealership and ordering a custom car, and the salesperson guesstimating what it's going to take to build that car and coming up with a price. And then after the fact, the customer decides they want extra things that they did not include in the original request for the car. And I find that is the case with web development and web design. It's a very difficult thing to continue to do. And I can't remember his name, but he wrote the book Profit First. And this is a common problem in the industry where people don't know how to price themselves competitively and provide value and also make profit. And so I'm just trying to figure out, I know a guy who I interviewed and he publicly said this. He grew his agency to like 330 clients and he grew himself broke. He was not making any money. He was paying himself very little. And he disclosed this on a previous episode. And it's, how do you do that in that regard? Like, how did you solve that problem?
We had a agency locally that approached me and said, hey, we'd love to, the owner of the business was looking to step out and he's like, hey, I'm moving. I'd love to sell you my agency. I was like, that's great. You have a client list of 100 people that are the lower end clients who all pay the $99 for hosting and have crappy broken websites. I was like, why would I pay you money for that list? They're all on your portfolio page on your website. I was like, I'll just wait till someone buys your company and then I'll just go down the list and contact each one of them. Like, why? Going back to your question, I think one of the biggest things where, and I've said this before on a podcast and in some other articles and stuff, and it's not a oftentimes well-received comment by some people in the industry, is the companies that are out there that are niching down are in reality what I refer to as execution agencies. They have one strategy that they have developed, and all they're doing is running around and they're executing that strategy. The problem is the strategy for an accountant to acquire new customers is going to work for other accountants sometimes. It might not work for accountants that specialize in a specific field or a niche, or only work with high net worth individuals, or only work with whatever. And so the problem is there's a strategy that's already been developed and it's not being custom tailored to each business. And so oftentimes that marketing agency is running around and executing. And reality is they're not executing a strategy, they're executing the businesses that they're bringing on as clients. And without customizing a strategy, your strategy is not going to work. You can we have 2 clients that are in the exact same industry that do almost the exact same thing, but their ideal client is night and day different. And so in reality, the same strategy for marketing does not work for both clients. The same strategy for content doesn't work for both clients. And so that's where for us, we lead with a strategy first approach. We want to make sure that the client, and the hard part is oftentimes when a client comes to us, they're like, we've been in business 9 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever that is. And we're on our 4th, 5th, 6th website. And none of our other sites have really done much. They haven't really produced much in the way of leads. And I'm like, great, here's 50 questions we want to know about your business. And I've literally had a company who's not a client, but we sat down and had a conversation, and they build custom pools. They're not custom the typical pools, so custom swimming pools, but they're the ones that have the waterfall and the swim up bar. I sat down and I asked the owner, I said, hey, who is your ideal client? And he said, anyone within about 20 miles of my business. I was like, so the guy who's renting an apartment, the person who's month to month on their mortgage, like those are not your ideal client. Your pool is going to be 6 figures. Like you're talking $200,000 for a custom pool, what this company builds. I was like, that's not someone who's month to month. That's not someone who lives in a small house. That's someone who has a half acre plus of property, who typically has a college degree and makes high 6 figures, if not 7 figures a year. And the guy was just like, just taken back by this. And I'm like, okay, how long have you been in business? And he's like, 25 years. I was like, if you would have figured this out 25 years ago, that you're not directing your marketing correctly, I'm like, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now because you'd be in the Bahamas
making so much money from selling
exactly, or running it, and he just comes back twice a month or once a month and just checks in, whatever.
Yeah.
In reality, so many businesses are selling $250,000 swimming pools to the guy who's renting an apartment.
Is that one of the biggest mistakes people making in the last 15 years?
100%. 100%. We had a client locally, brick and mortar, that you have to physically be on property. It's not a store, but a physical, like in-person experience type, like thing. Anyway. And so when we onboarded with the client, they were spending, I think it was like $3,000 to $4,000 a month in Google AdWords. And they'd been spending that amount of money for somewhere in the realm of 4 or 5 years. Wow. And no one had set a geo location on the ads. So they had spent somewhere in the realm of like $80,000 or $90,000 in ad waste because they didn't hire an agency to come in and set.
Are they running it themselves?
They were running it themselves. And what happened was, so it was set up. They had reached out to a Google rep or something. The Google rep helped them set it up, and no one ever looked at it. And so we charged them to do an account audit. So we built this client a website and did all this other stuff for them. And then I said, okay, what other marketing are you doing? And we're going to basically audit all of your marketing because we're looking at your strategy and we want to figure out where things are at. And they're like, oh, no, our ads are fine. Our ads are fine. I was like, no, this is part of our thing. We're going to look and we're going to take a peek at all the accounts. If it's good, then we'll just say, that's fine, leave it. We won't touch it. We'll step back. But if we see a problem, we're going to come in and help assess that and fix the issue. And we took their ad budget from the $3,000 a month or whatever it was. And I think we dumped it down to $250. And it might be a little bit more. It might have been around $500. And then we set a geolocation. And then we took the other $2,500 that they weren't spending there, and we put $1,000 or $1,500 into SEO. We put another $500 into some Facebook ads. And so inside of that $3,000 a month, we just reallocated the funds and massively. Their SEO ranking organically now is ridiculous. The Google ads we only run for testing. And it's crazy to see that so many business owners, and sadly, oftentimes business owners are cautious about letting an agency take a peek because the agency says, oh, I can get you better results. Just double the amount you're spending. Double what you're spending.
Especially if you get paid a percentage of ad spend.
Exactly. And so if that person is that business owner, that's what they've been used to, is just agencies coming in and just trying to crank the dial up on the spend. That's one of the challenges that we're up against on a daily basis, having that conversation with business owners. But it's crazy. I can't tell you how many times we've seen this type of stuff. I'm like, what would a business owner have done with $100,000 more? And sometimes it's not a $2,500 a month waste. Sometimes we had a client recently that we onboarded them as a client, and they're like, I keep getting this bill from GoDaddy. I was like, what's the invoice for? And they're like, I don't know. I just pay it every month. And I'm like, okay, great. We hop in the GoDaddy account, take a look. And I'm like, when was the last time you guys hosted anything with GoDaddy? And they're like, I don't know. It's been probably 3 or 4 years. And I'm like, great. You've been spending $150, $250 a month for a dedicated server over at GoDaddy that's just been running for the past 3 years with nothing on it.
So what's your approach then to helping customers develop that persona? Because that's what they need to do, is find out who their persona is.
So we have a process that we've developed over the years that basically we work through a few things with the client. One, if a client comes to us and says, I have no idea who our ideal client is, we sit down and work with them to develop that. We have an ideal client workbook that we go through, and we develop that with the client. And then from there, we're going to write content based around who that ideal client is. So many people will have a website rebuilt and they spend all this money on a brand new website. And then the first thing they do when the developer asks for content is they go, I just grab whatever's on our old website. And it's got it. So all we're doing is we're taking the same broken and dead and not SEO'd content, and we're just repainting it. That's all you're doing. If you're not revising and refreshing that copy, and if that content was written 2, 3, 4, 5+ years ago, how people do things online has changed. How people interact with websites has changed. We've got clients who, during COVID, I'm looking through their website and I'm like, hey, you guys closed your office 9 months ago, but it still has that as a location on your contact page. Maybe we should update this. And people oftentimes don't think about that stuff. And so we go through and revise their content or rewrite their content entirely based upon how people read online now and how that ideal client is going to read and how they're going to perceive the business, and going through archetypes and making sure that the content is in alignment with what the business archetype is. And there's just a lot of stuff there from a strategy perspective that business owners don't think about, but it can make the difference in your website ranking well on Google or not ranking well, your website converting or not converting. And there's just so much to go into that. And that's a big part of our process.
It's interesting how important it is. For instance, I was talking to one individual. He said, Red Bull no longer views themselves as a soft drink company. They view themselves as a media company. And they've chosen a specific demographic in extreme sports that is underserved. And they've created multiple personas. In fact, I was talking to the guy who wrote the book, YouTube and Video Marketing an Hour a Day. And he was telling me this. He goes, you need to know who your target market is. It's so important. Yep. And they create content. They don't create content about how great their drink is or the features and benefits of their drink. They create content that people want to watch based on sports, extreme sports, little tidbits, and they've exponentially grown their sales as a result. And it's amazing how many business. I worked for a very large manufacturer in the automotive industry in a car dealership. And I asked for the data I asked the head office for what you're talking about, the personas. Who are our personas that buy this vehicle? They couldn't give me any of that information. They had none of it. And they are a very large manufacturer who I won't name because I don't want to get sued. And so I dug into the CRM and started looking at the data in the CRM and trying to figure things out that way. And I had I had some success doing that. However, I wish that AI had been around then as it is now, because I could have written those customer personas like.
You pass a lot of that information off to AI nowadays. And that's where I think I briefly talked about some agencies niching down, and there's nothing wrong with niching down if you are customizing the strategy. Customize the strategy, customize the experience. And so I think what happens with especially car dealerships is they just go so broad. They're looking at, they're like, anybody and everybody who wants to buy a car. And that's where, but you look at some brands, there was this video I was watching the other day, and they were talking about Rolls-Royce, I think it was, and how they don't advertise in traditional markets. They advertise at air shows. They advertise in private jet magazines. They advertise it because they know that if you have money to be flipping through and looking at a private jet, then dropping money on a Rolls-Royce is nothing. And that's the people that they want to attract.
That's so important to find out who your customer is and then target them where they're at. I learned all this from Dan Kennedy, reading a lot of his books, The Ultimate Marketing Plan, The Ultimate Sales Letter, so on and so forth. He talked about the 3 M's of marketing: your market, your message, and your medium. And so many people want to just jump into the medium.
Yeah.
And just
splat
it, just spray and pray ads everywhere. It is.
Not only jump into that medium, but also jump into all of the mediums. And that's, we see it all the time. Clients will ask us, they're like, there's all these social media platforms. Should I just create accounts on all of them? And I'm like, creating an account on all of them just to grab your handle is not a bad idea. Set up the profile, link it to your website, do that. But maybe don't be active on all of them, because where is your target audience? If your target audience is all hanging out on Instagram, but all you're doing is blasting stuff on Twitter
or Pinterest,
and you're just screaming into a void. And making sure that your audience is on the platform that you're on. And we saw this a lot during the beginning of COVID with things like TikTok. And you look at some of the people that just blew up on some of these platforms at the beginning of COVID because they had an interesting message, whether it was stupid video that they were doing, or I look at, there's a financial advisor that I follow on Instagram now, and she started posting at the beginning of COVID, ended up just quitting her job because she was getting so much traction on Instagram and TikTok and all these platforms. And she was like, I can literally create a following that will be massive through just sharing information. And I see a lot of these platforms that business owners can leverage, but like you mentioned, the sort of spray and pray type element, we all see those when you go on Facebook and it's the guy who all he posts is the same thing. It's just a photo of his business card and he does it every day. No one's hiring you off of that. People are, but it's just, that's not the great way to do it. Create some content that's going to be helpful and memorable, and that's where the money lives.
For entrepreneurs and startups who are just starting out, they can't afford full-fledged custom web design and development in a marketing strategy because that costs money. I'm thinking about the startup home inspector or the startup plumber or the startup, I don't know, pick something. But what advice would you give them to be able to get things off the ground? Are there any resources that you've leveraged in your career that you would tell them to read?
Yeah, I think there's a few elements. One is just knowing who your ideal client is. And a lot of our worksheets and our packets that I've mentioned that my company's developed over the years, we actually publicly have those available on our website. And anyone can go grab them and download them and use them. We've had locally, there's another agency that I know that oftentimes will have prospective clients that come in with our packet all filled out and walk into their office, which is fine. If it's helping a business, that's awesome. Understanding who that ideal client is, understanding where they live digitally from a what platforms are they on perspective. And if you don't know, then great. Go ask 2 or 3 of them. If you're a home inspector, great. Go ask. In reality, home inspector, your ideal client isn't the home buyer. Your ideal client is the real estate agent, because that real estate agent is going to send you leads for the next 10 years. So
don't even target home buyers, target real estate agents.
There's a company, there's a guy locally who he and I were talking, and he's like, I want to do this and this in marketing, and this is what I want to spend. And I was like, okay, that's great, but I don't think you're going to actually be able to get a hold of your ideal client through the platforms that you want to market on. And I said, in all honesty, I think a better spend is go to Google, go to Yelp, make a list of your top 50 people that you want to connect with. And this week, call the first one and say, hey, listen, are you free for lunch on Friday? I'd like to take you to lunch. I want to buy you lunch and just get to know you. And I was like, in reality, what's lunch going to cost you for you and one person? $50, maybe $60 the most. Maybe. And if you do that on a weekly basis, what are we looking at? $250 maybe for the whole month. And so in reality, trying to reach those 4 people from ads online, you're probably going to spend a lot more than that because it's a small niche. And buy them lunch. So if you're a home inspector and you're trying to connect with some real estate agents, buy them lunch, take them to lunch, get creative. There was a company that reached out to us, a guy up in the Bay Area that reached out, and he was maybe 3 months in on a auto detailing company. And he was like, this is what I want to do. And I need a website and I need marketing and I need this and I need that. And I was like, okay, hold up. What is your marketing budget? And he's, I could probably swing $200 to $300 this year. And I was like, then this phone call, you're getting nowhere, dude. And I was like, here's the deal. Find 2 high schools, connect with their ASB and say, you want to do a fundraiser and you want to help them run a car wash and do a fundraiser. And you're going to split the proceeds with them for it and do that. Bring in every family member or friend that you have that can help wash cars, buy t-shirts, stick them in your company t-shirts, do that. Talk to the local newspaper and see if they'll do an article on it and see what happens. And I said, and call me back in 6 months and let me know how it's going. And it was like 4 months later, I get an email from this guy and he goes, I now have 2 trucks and I have 4 employees and we're scaling the business. And he goes, every month they pick a different school and they partner with the ASB department and they do a big giant fundraiser. And he goes, and we'll raise $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 for the school. And he goes, and then we get booked for the next 3-4 weeks. And we're booked 7 days a week for a month.
Josh, that is such an amazing idea. And only a marketer could come up with an idea like that. So I tip my hat to you. Did he become a client or he's still working towards that? No,
he's working towards it. And honestly, if that's his strategy, does he need a website? No, not necessarily. Spin up an Instagram account, maybe buy the domain name of your business and repoint it to the Instagram account. And honestly, would a website help the credibility? Maybe he could do an online payment, but in reality, he has pay him via Venmo or whatever.
Yeah.
So does it exponentially help that business? I don't think it would at this moment. Now, if he's got 20 trucks and he's franchising to other cities and he's growing it beyond that, then okay, maybe. But there's a spot where I don't think a business needs to spend thousands of dollars a year on marketing and a website and stuff. And I think the biggest thing, and this is the pattern that all of these sort of examples have had, is find an existing community, find an existing group, and rally around that existing group, that existing community, help that community or help that group in a way, and then they will turn around and help you.
There's a philosophy called giver's gain. There's a book I read, a business book about giving, like the Go Giver or something like that. Go Givers. That's what it's called. Go Givers. And when you give first, it will come back to you. It's a phenomenal book. And it's so true. Everything you're saying. It's we touched on it just a little bit, but with what's the word I'm looking for? With the reality of AI, the exponential growth, the result of AI coming on the scene. And I personally believe that platforms are going to be around where you put in information like the Squarespace and all that are only going to get better in the sense that if you host with Odoo, you answer some questions and it spits out a website for you. What do you think the future of web development is with that in mind? And how are you staying ahead of the curve and pivoting?
I think there's some definite benefit to AI. And I think there's also some challenges and some stuff that we still need to be cautious about. Right now, there's some of the AI companies are getting sued for infringement of copyright because some of the work that they were trained on was copywritten work and it's using pieces of those now in reproduction. And so there's some of those issues. And just how do you create new and original work and some of that. So that's definitely a problem. Now, the second part to that is there are some things that AI is great at. There are some things that AI is absolutely terrible at. There's some things that AI is learning and is getting better on. And so an example of something great, like I heard recently, there's some attorneys now that are using AI to go through discovery docs. And so they can have 10,000 pages of discovery documentation that gets scanned in and OCR'd. And then they can tell the AI to go through all of the discovery, say, find correlations between Mr. Smith, and it can find me. We found this parking ticket that this guy got, and this guy had lunch in the same city, and they're 2 blocks from each other. And like, find any correlation between any of these items. And AI can do that, and it's great at that stuff. Now, I will say we've played with AI a little bit as well, and we've done a bunch of tests, and there's some who write a paragraph about this, and it's, dang, that's good content. And then we'll say, write a paragraph about this. And we're like, that sounds like gibberish. And so it's what we've used AI for of recent is it's a great tool for brainstorming. It's a great tool for getting out of writer's block. And so if you're like, man, I need to write something on this topic, and you just sit there and stare at a blank Google Doc, you're never going to get that done. But you hop over to some AI tools and you say, hey, what are 25 different things that I could write about on this topic? And it goes, here's 25 different ones. And then you skim through those ideas and you start to generate your own based upon some of the ideas and concepts that you're reading. And then you go from there. And so
I heard one person say that. He's gotten ideas from AI that have started him off, but never been the final idea. It's on the first iteration. 5 years from now, it's unbelievable.
I literally got an email right before I hopped on here from OpenAI about a demo that they're doing for GPT-4 today. So
I'm a Plus member, so I've already got access to it. I've already been playing with it. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, it's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. How can our audience connect with you online?
So I'm Joshua Maddux on LinkedIn, or if you just search 95 Visual. And then I alluded to a bunch of our different docs and stuff, Ideal Client Doc and other ones. If you go to 95visual.com/plan, I think it is, or under the resource tab, there's a tab there. There's a bunch of different guides and resources, and we're constantly adding to and improving that section. We're actually in the middle of a full website refresh, and that section's going to be beefed up substantially. So we're constantly doing that. Anytime we produce guides and resources for our clients, we end up publishing them as well.
Hey, thanks so much. We'll make sure to put that information in the show notes. And again, thanks so much for being here. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Good to be on. Thanks.
Right on. Thanks.